How important will the run game be for both the Chargers and the Raiders on Sunday? Find that out, plus a whole lot more on Thursday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. It's Crossover Thursday, baby. We made it. It's September 5th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. And as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of your support, Raider Nation, and, of course, because of my man Ari, who does a great job each and every day getting us on YouTube, making sure we're looking good, we're sounding good. We appreciate him. We shout him out. He's on Twitter, at Ari Produces. You can hit him up. I'm on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254. You want to hit me up as well. It is all good. And, of course, you want to be a part of the show. We got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. No calls or texts on today's show, and this is why. It's Crossover Thursday. It's the first edition of the crossover shows that we have throughout the course of the 2024 season, which is a good thing. That means that we made it. We made it to the regular season. Of course, tonight's going to be the first NFL game of the 2024 season between the Chiefs and the Ravens. We'll be watching that. But, of course, on this show today, we'll be talking about Sunday's game, Raiders and Chargers. So we welcome in one of the hosts from the other team. Of course, that's the Chargers. So Locked On Chargers host David Droegemeir, he'll actually join the show. We'll talk all things, big storylines for the offense, big storylines for the defense for both teams, and three different things that it's going to take, three keys for each team to get to victory throughout the course of the show. And normally David Droegemeir is with Daniel Wade. They're a co-host there on the Chargers show, but Daniel just had a baby. So David Droegemeir went solo bolo on the show with me, and really some good stuff, man. It was great just to catch back up and be able to do the crossover edition and understand that we're talking about an actual game. We're not talking about speculation on the division. We're talking about an actual game. What's it going to take for the Chargers to get a dub? What's it going to take for the Raiders to get a dub? So very excited that we're back at this. That means that there's a game around the corner, and, of course, it's coming up on Sunday, 1 p.m. kickoff Pacific time from SoFi Stadium in LA. So we'll jump right into part one of the crossover edition after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is PrizePicks. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You only need to win to receive $50 bonus. PrizePicks, run your game. So here we go. It is game week. Excited about that. The Chargers are first up on the schedule. So David Droegemeir, since they are the home team, they being the LA Chargers, he is the host of Locked On Chargers. He's really getting his Howard Cosell on, and he's going to ask me all things Raiders questions related here in segment number one. We're going to talk about the biggest storylines when it comes to the offense of the Raiders, biggest storylines when it comes to the defense of the Raiders. So that'll be segment number one. Segment number two, we'll flip things up and talk all things Chargers. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into part one of the crossover edition. David Droegemeir and myself talking all things Raiders.
Well, Q, you guys are the away team, so we're going to go ahead and kick things off with you guys starting on offense. What would you say is the biggest story for the Raiders going into this game on offense?
Well, I think it's just what the quarterback play is going to look like, right? I mean, I think there's no mistake in it. The Raiders did it all training camp, all preseason. They had a quarterback battle between Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, and to be 100% honest, neither one of the guys wowed, right? There's never one time when I was in Costa Mesa at training camp did I say, wow, that quarterback is fantastic, or that quarterback's fantastic. It was just, it was okay, and it was never consistent. And I think we all know who Gardner Minshew is. Obviously, he's been in the league for a while. He's been on multiple teams, and Aiden O'Connell's going into year two. So Antonio Pierce, after the second preseason game, made the decision to go with Gardner Minshew. He's a veteran. He also has some mobility, so he's able to get out of harm's way if need be. And AP has said that the first four games of the season are so important. The first quarter, get off to a hot start where the Raiders have normally gotten off to slow starts and trying to battle back at the end of the season, try to claw their way into playoff contention. So really, I think the veterans in place to go ahead and try to set the tone. And, the good thing about this road trip to LA is it's only a road trip to LA where the Raiders have a heavy fan base there, but they haven't had a lot of successes so far. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out on Sunday between, the Raiders and the Chargers. But I think the biggest storyline is, what is this offense going to look like? how much consistent quarterback play can you get from Gardner Minshew? If you can get some good quarterback play, I think they have an opportunity to do some good things.
Yeah, you kind of alluded to it. The Raiders are 1-6 at SoFi, and it is obviously not the best record in the world. But I want to just ask you a little bit more about that quarterback situation. What was your take on it? Just who do you think really played the best? Do you feel like they put the best quarterback out there to be the starter week 1?
I do, only because of the mobility of Gardner Minshew. Right, Aiden O'Connell has a stronger arm. I think he's got it between the ears. I think that's important. He's really a sharp young man out of Purdue, and I think that he does have a future in the league. I don't know if he's going to be a starting quarterback, what he's going to be, like what his ceiling is, but I don't think that Antonio Pierce could take the chance to try to learn what his ceiling could be right out the gates, because as I mentioned, he really wants to start out fast. And so at least they know what you get with Gardner Minshew. And if the offensive line, which is going to come in not 100% intact, it's not going to be the starting offensive line that you'll see later on in the season. So I think that with that being said, they're going to have a guy that can move around, a guy that can get out of harm's way. Now, the tricky part about this is that there's times where Gardner Minshew leaves the pocket too soon. So there's times that he doesn't allow the play to happen, and he just, I got to get out of here because I have the ability to, which is great. But you have Devontae Adams, you have Jacoby Myers, you have Brock Bowers, you have Michael Mayer, you have a guy in Trey Tucker that can stretch the field. So sometimes, as Antonio Pierce said, you've got to be able to read the plays there and let it rip. And even on shorter plays, like little slants, let Devontae have an opportunity. Let Jacoby have an opportunity. So really, I think the biggest key, and this is something I've been talking about all week long, is Gardner Minshew just has to make the right decisions. He can't force anything. He can't get too backyard football on everybody and wants to get, like drawing up plays in the sand. He's got to play within himself and give his playmakers chance, because look, you could look at it on paper. They have playmakers. They just got to be able to get them to the ball in this West Coast offense, where a guy like Devontae can get the yards after the catch, or Jacoby, Brock, Michael Mayer, whatever the case may be. It's going to be yards after the catch is going to be the key here. So when it comes to the quarterback play, it's just you got to make smart decisions.
Yeah, no question about it. You got to protect the football. We know how important that stat is. That turnover margin is crucially important in this great game of football. But switching things over to the defensive side, the Raiders had a pretty good defense last year. I mean, they had some good pieces, and it seems like they added even more by adding Christian Wilkins, who, by all accounts, is one of the best interior defensive linemen in the National Football League. So what do you think would be the biggest storyline on defense for the Raiders?
I just think it's unleashing that defense, right? I mean, all offseason long, all training camp, all preseason, that's all we've been talking about, is this defense is going to be top 5 defense. This defense is going to have Max Crosby in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. Malcolm Kuntz came on strong. You mentioned Christian Wilkins. He comes over. He's the big fellow in the middle. Now quarterbacks can't really step up into the pocket and be able to have those opportunities. So it's all about the defense. It really is. Antonio Pierce wants to hang his hat on this team being a very strong defensive-minded team. And look, Patrick Graham is the defensive coordinator, is going into year 3. It's the first time I've said that in a long time about a Raiders defensive coordinator, right? I mean, it's just the consistency hasn't been there. And so the defense is getting better. And as you saw at the end of the season last year, they were really cooking with grease. And so now they're expecting to come in, really full throttle. And they've got Jack Jones there at the cornerback position, who they picked up off of waivers from the Patriots last year, and he had a couple pick sixes. He showed what he can do in a small sample size. So now you're saying, okay, you're going to get him for a full season. What can he do? Nate Hobbs is going into a contract year. Trayvon Merrick in the back end is going into a contract year. Malcolm Kuntz is going into a contract year. Robert Spillane, contract year. Like, all these guys, there's like 7 dudes that are going into the contract year on defense, which means you always get their best play. So the expectations of the Raiders defense is going to be really good. Obviously led by Max Crosby, but they've got to go out there and they've got to put it out there on wax, because, well, in the preseason, everything was really vanilla and you didn't get to see a whole lot.
Yeah, and it seemed like for the Raiders, they were playing their starters quite a lot. More than I would say most teams around the league. Like, they were getting a couple of quarters worth of play out there, to really try to get comfortable and, get some real snaps going. But, outside, opposite of Max Crosby, because, obviously we know how dangerous and disruptive Max Crosby is. What's the other side of that edge rush look like, on the opposite side?
It's funny, man. It's supposed to be Tyree Wilson, right? It's supposed to be the guy that was selected number 7 overall just a season ago out of Texas Tech, but it's not. It's Malcolm Kuntz, who was a former third-round pick out of Buffalo. And it's funny, as the Chargers know by another guy out of Buffalo, it's a pretty good edge rusher, in Khalil Mack, who the Raiders had at one point, right? I mean, Malcolm Kuntz knows all about Khalil Mack because he went to Buffalo as well. He really emerged last year. After November 1st, he had 8 sacks and 3 forced fumbles. That was post November 1st. Like, that was the last 9 games of the season. He was just as disruptive as possible. So the Raiders believe that they found their Robin to Max Crosby's Batman. And it's not Tyree. It's not the guy that they drafted number 7 overall to be that guy. It's a guy that at one point, while Josh McDaniels was still the head coach, was really kind of in the doghouse and was never even thought of. Like, I thought there was a chance last season he didn't even make the team. Right? I thought, oh, this guy's probably going to get cut because he's not doing anything. But luckily for him, he made the team. And luckily for the Raiders, he made the team. And then all of a sudden he flourished in the second half of the season. And so everyone's expecting him to be really good. And think about this, David, like, Max is going to get a ton of attention. We know that.
Of course.
Christian Wilkins is going to get a ton of attention. We know that. That's going to free up Malcolm Kuntz to have a lot of one-on-one opportunities. Now, if he can beat the offensive lineman in front of him, he's going to have a chance to get to the quarterback, and he's a fast dude. He's got a lot of bend. He gets to the quarterback, and he's really good at getting strip sacks as well. So he's actually a guy that I'm kind of saying is going to be the breakout player, or the player that, we're talking about the most at the end of the season, because I just think he's going to get so many opportunities that Max Crosby or Christian Wilkins won't get.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, he's going to have a pretty tough test going up against Rashawn Slater, the former All-Pro at left tackle for the Chargers. But we are going to get into the Chargers side of things. What is the biggest storylines for the Chargers? Has a little something to do with Jim Harbaugh, a little hint there, a little teaser there. So we're going to get into the biggest storylines for the Chargers on offense and defense, and we're going to do that right after this.
So there we are right there. That is part 1 of the crossover edition. David Droegemeir and myself talking all things Raiders, talking about the biggest storylines when it comes to the offense, biggest storylines when it comes to the defense. So, of course, we're going to flip things up. In segment number 2, we'll talk about the biggest storylines when it comes to the offense of the Chargers, biggest storylines when it comes to the defense of the Chargers as well. Of course, it's old school rivalry. Love it. A division rival game. Excited about it. And just let's be honest, excited to see football back. So we'll do that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is PrizePicks. And what is PrizePicks, you're probably asking? Well, it's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in just like that. So maybe you're a big Caleb Williams fan. 1 Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on PrizePicks every week in the month of September. That's right, only 1 yard is going to get you an automatic win every football weekend in September. That's 4 W's. 4 free W's on top of that. So don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. What about this? PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. So your lineup stays in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, don't worry. PrizePicks, your picks are still alive. So that's fantastic as well. What do you need to get involved? Well, just download the PrizePick app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive $50 bonus dollars. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast and part 2 of the crossover edition. David Droegemeir from the Locked On Chargers podcast and myself. We talked all things Raiders in segment number 1. So now it's time to return the favor. We talk all things Chargers. So David Droegemeir starts us off talking about the Chargers offense and what to look for, some of the biggest storylines when it comes to LA.
All right, Q, we are back here on Crossover Thursday, the very first Crossover Thursday of the season. Yeah. And we got to switch things over to the Chargers side of things. And so, Q, there's been a lot of change for the Chargers, a lot. And everything kind of stemmed from that embarrassing loss on primetime football in front of the entire world. One of the worst Thursday night football games in Chargers history, probably in NFL history, to be quite honest. It was a ugly, ugly game, especially for the Chargers side of things. But when we talk about the biggest storylines here, I would say it's probably just the start of the Jim Harbaugh era.
Right.
Jim Harbaugh coming in, being an established winning head coach, a guy that has a track record of turning around bad teams and turning them into good teams. Whether you go all the way back to the beginning at University of San Diego, or you go to Stanford or Michigan, the 49ers, it doesn't matter. Any and every stop, Jim Harbaugh has turned teams over and done it very, very quickly. So how is this going to look like under the Jim Harbaugh offense, the Greg Roman offense? Are they going to be able to find a way to get some revenge on that 63-21 blowout? Because yes, Jim Harbaugh wasn't there for it,
right,
but he definitely is here because of it. That's for sure. The Chargers fired Tom Telesco and fired Brandon Staley that night because of that embarrassing performance, and that led them to finally bust open the checkbook and go out and get an established winner with Jim Harbaugh. And of course, that means bringing in Greg Roman. So how's that offense going to look like with Greg Roman really, hopefully, trying to bring a true running game to pair with Justin Herbert's elite arm talent?
Right. That's my biggest question, when you look at it, because we know what Jim Harbaugh wants to do, right? We saw him at the University of Michigan. We've seen him at every stop that he's been at. Is a heavy dose of the run game, especially what Greg Roman did in Baltimore with the Ravens. So, yeah, how do you see this playing out? I know Justin Herbert's coming in just a little banged up with the plantar fascia, but it sounds like he's going to be 100%, be good to go. How do they, I guess, kind of compare and contrast or balance out that offense so you get the most out of Justin Herbert, but you also stick to the bread and butter of Jim Harbaugh?
Yeah, honestly, Q, I think it's all about trying to bring more balance to the Chargers' offensive attack, because the last several years, it's been pretty easy to play defense against the Chargers because they couldn't run the ball. They had absolutely no semblance of a consistent running game. Yeah, they had Austin Eckler, but Austin Eckler was more of a, pass catching running back. He just didn't really do very, high quality work in between the tackles. Okay. And that's going to be completely different under Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh. He's going to bring out the 7 offensive lineman sets. He's already turned a defensive lineman in Scott Matlock into a fullback who's going to be the fullback for the Chargers. So they're going to bring it. They want to establish that line of scrimmage. They want to dominate that line of scrimmage. They want to run the football down the opponent's throat, which is going to open things up for Justin Herbert, which, he really needs. Like, Justin Herbert can put it anywhere on the football field. He can thread the needle for sure. He's very accurate. He has an extremely strong arm, and he's had to use it because he hasn't had very much separation, because the defense can just sit back and put a roof over the coverage and deny him those deep passes. So when you establish that running game, then the defense has to think, who is going to be the one that's going to hurt me? Is it going to be the running game? Is it going to be the passing game? I have to now account for both.
Right. There's no doubt. And I'll tell you this little nugget from preseason. And I know that we don't take too much from preseason. Everything's vanilla. The Raiders struggled to stop the run. Right. I mean, and that's something that we've been talking about a lot here on the Locked On Raiders podcast is, hey, man, look, the Chargers are going to want to run the rock. So, we know this. And, the Raiders gave up 142, 142, and 132 in 3, straight weeks in the preseason. Again, just the preseason, everything's vanilla. Yeah. So sure. I don't want to take too much from it. But knowing that what you just said, that the Chargers want to run the ball, establish the run, that could be a way to open things up for Justin Herbert in that passing game.
Yeah, because it's desperately needed. I mean, Justin Herbert needs some help, okay? They need to bring some balance to that offense, but that's not the only place where we saw a lot of change. We have a completely new defensive coordinator now, bringing in Jesse Minter from Michigan, who authored the #1 defense in all of college football last year and was a derivative of the Baltimore Ravens defense, which was the #1 defense in the NFL last year. So we know what the scheme can do.
He's pretty good is what you're saying.
he's all right. He's all right. But we're not going to buy in completely, okay? Right. Because we've seen a wonderkind come in, get a head coaching job, and then author one of the worst defenses in the NFL the last 3 or 4 years. Of course, I'm talking about Brandon Staley. So we are going to pump the brakes a little bit on that, but I think what we're excited about here with the Chargers and Chargers fans about the defense is that it's a little bit more simplistic for the players. They know what they're going to be doing. It's streamlined for them. It's easy for them, but difficult for the opponent because there's going to be a lot of simulated pressures. There's going to be a lot of disguise. And, Jesse Minter loves to use that slot blitz, at least from what we've seen in the preseason. So the thing is the defense has been flying around, Q. I mean, all offseason, even, picking off Trey Lance 5 times, the pass rush has been deadly. I mean, they have the potential to have the best pass rush in the entire NFL with Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Tuli Pelotu, and they added Bud Dupree to that room as well. So it just lengthens that room and allows them to keep their pass rushers more fresh. But it's going to be a good challenge. How is the Raiders offensive lineman looking? How do you think that matchup's going to go?
Well, that's going to be the key, and that's exactly where I was going to go, because I know that just like the Chargers want to run the rock, the Raiders are going to want to run the rock, right? And so the Chargers, one of their big Achilles heels have been stopping the run, right? When you look at that defense, you see all the guys that can get to the quarterback. And the past couple of years, you've seen the other teams have the ability to run the ball, and the Raiders are going to want to do that on Sunday against the Chargers. So the offensive line, I feel like it's in a good place, even though it's not the exact addition of the offensive line. JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson, the second-round pick out of Oregon, he's not expected to start on Sunday, so they'll have the old veteran Cody Whitehair, but everyone else is in place. Colton Miller, Cody Whitehair, Andre James, Dylan Parham, and then Thayer Munford. So I think that the offensive line has a chance to be good. It'll be at full strength when JPJ returns, but I don't think that's going to be on Sunday versus the Chargers. And they're going to want to run the ball. So, I mean, when you're looking at this Chargers defense, you know that they can pin their ears back and get to the quarterback. How are they right now, in your opinion, about stopping the run?
Yeah, so I think they've definitely overhauled the defensive line. They brought in guys like Tier Tart. They brought in Poona Ford, who just didn't get a lot of opportunities with the Buffalo Bills last year. But these are guys that are proven guys that can stop the run. And I think with the Chargers defense and offense, really, they're depending on a lot of guys to bounce back. They think that Christian Fulton's really in a much better spot at the cornerback position. But I think for me, the reason why I'm bullish kind of on the Chargers run defense is their linebackers are very, very athletic. Outside of Denzel Perriman, Denzel Perriman. Yep. Denzel Perriman comes downhill like a heat-seeking missile through the gap. He can annihilate running backs in the hole. That's what he has done his entire career, but he is a liability in coverage. But that's why the Chargers have Deion Henley, who is an athletic freak, a linebacker that can really go sideline to sideline. As a former safety, he has some really kind of very comfortable coverage skills. It seems like he knows how to do that. And, you can kind of trust him out there. So the linebackers are, I think, in a much better spot over where they were last year under Kenneth Murray and, an aging partner there that he was playing alongside with Eric Kendricks. So I like the fact that the defensive line is going to try some new bodies, but I'm bullish on the linebackers. And of course, as you know, it takes every single part of the defense to stop the run. Everybody's got to be working in concert.
Yeah, it's going to be a very physical game. That's what I do know. It's going to be a very physical game. Both teams are going to want to run the ball. Both teams are going to want to get their playmakers the ball as well. But a lot of physicality in the trenches. And I mean, again, you said it at the top, man. One of the oldest rivalries in football. It's going to be one of those slobber knockers, right? A lot of physicality, a lot of pain, but it's going to be inflicted on Sunday. And I think you're here for it. I know I'm here for it as well.
Well, I'm definitely here for it because the Chargers have been a finesse team for the last several years, and Jim Harbaugh is not playing that. He wants to play hard-nosed, drag, knock you out type of football, and I know that the Raiders play that style of football as well, so it is going to be a slobber knocker, and I absolutely can't wait, and we're going to find out what the keys to success are. What does each one of these teams, the Chargers and Raiders, what do they need to do in order to pick up the first win of the season? And we are going to get into that and more on this Crossover Thursday episode right after this.
There it is. There it was. And it's funny, while I was listening to what David had to say about the Chargers, and of course he's talking about Jim Harbaugh, all I kept thinking of is, man, what would have happened if Antonio Pierce wasn't successful? Right, in 2023, once he became the interim, if he wasn't successful, right? Would the Chargers be talking about Jim Harbaugh, or would the Raiders be talking about Jim Harbaugh? I'm very happy. Let's not get twisted. I'm very happy that Antonio Pierce is the head coach. It's just funny because it's the first game of the season, and of course, that's the big headline. Jim Harbaugh's in L.A. Jim Harbaugh's in L.A., and I saw a lot of Charger fans like, man, glad that the Raiders put that whooping on the Chargers, that 63-point performance on Thursday Night Football, because it allowed, the Spanos family to go ahead and fire their head coach, fire their GM, and then they go and open up the book like David David said, and they bring in Jim Harbaugh. So it's so funny. And even Antonio Pierce was asked about that Thursday or Wednesday, I should say, at the Raiders facility. And he's like, hey, man, if I'm in the same conversation with Jim Harbaugh as far as me and him coming down to the wire to be the head coach of this team, I guess I'm in pretty good company. But I'm here as the head coach of the Silver and Black. And again, let's not get it twisted. I'm very happy AP is the head coach. I think he is definitely the right guy for the job. But that's, you want to talk about a storyline, funny storyline when you talk about these two organizations. Coming up in segment number 3, we're going to break it down. We're going to talk about 3 keys to victory for each team. You've heard about the offensive storylines, the defensive storylines for both teams. Now, 3 keys to victory for each team, the Raiders and the Chargers. We'll do that in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that's right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And it's not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So, if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn constantly finds ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and even quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Right now, post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Time to jump into part 3 of the crossover edition with David Droegemeir, one of the hosts of Locked On Chargers, and myself, as we're talking about the Week 1 matchup, Chargers and Raiders. And I know some folks don't ever tune into the podcast except for the crossover edition. Like, I know some folks, that's their favorite show of the week during the regular season, and that's awesome. I'm good with that. Whenever you decide to tune in, for whatever reason you want to tune in, you know I'm okay with that. But I know a crossover edition is a lot of folks' favorite shows that we do throughout the course of the week leading up to a game day. So here's the moment of truth, right? Segment number 3, part 3 of the crossover edition. We're going to give you 3 keys to victory for both teams, both the Chargers and the Raiders. So let's go ahead and jump into it. David Droegemeir and myself talking Chargers and Raiders, keys to victory.
All right, we are back here on Crossover Thursday, and Q, we got to talk about what each team is going to have to do to win this football game and start this season off 1-0 on this Crossover Thursday, but is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So obviously, again, you guys are the away team, so we're going to start with you guys. What are going to be the 3 things that you think that the Raiders have to do in order to win this football game on Sunday?
You know, it's funny, man, because I think about this all the time. I mean, obviously, every week we think about, what is it going to take for the team to get the victory? But for this team, the theme all season, as far as I'm concerned, one, they've got to stay on schedule, right? And I don't think I've ever said that as as one of the keys to the game is staying on schedule. But for this team and this offense in particular, it's going to be so important. The false starts, the holding penalties, the negative plays, the taking sacks or whatever, delay of games. They have multiples of those in the preseason. That's not going to fly. This team, and I know Raider Nation doesn't like it when I say it, this team offensively is not going to be good enough to overcome that. They're just not. They have to be sound. They have to stay on schedule in this Luke Getsy offense. They have to be able to get the ball to their playmakers, but they have to have, 2nd and 5, 2nd and 6, not 3rd and 11 or 2nd and 20. And those are just going to be drive killers for this team. So they've got to make sure that they stay on schedule. And I know it's not going to happen all the time. There's going to be times where they have issues, but this team is going to struggle to overcome those issues. So staying on schedule is going to be the biggest key for this team if they want to win this game or any other game throughout the course of the season. The other big key for the Raiders and this offense to have an opportunity to thrive is for Gardner Minshew to make good decisions, right? I mean, he can't turn the ball over. He can't leave the pocket too soon. He's got to understand where the play is supposed to develop, how to get it to the playmakers, and they have plenty. I don't think Gardner Minshew in the course of his career, whether it's in Jacksonville, Philadelphia, Indianapolis, now with the Raiders. I don't think he's ever had as many playmakers as he has right now. So he has an opportunity to have a really good season, but he's got to be the best version of himself. And the thing I've been really stressing is, what are you going to be consistently? Like, I don't need you to be a 10 and then a 3 and then a 5 and then a 9 and then a 6 and then a 2. I need you to give me at least a 7, right? If you can be a 7 consistently, I think Antonio Pierce and the Raiders will take that. They'll say, you know what? That's cool, especially with they're going to have a heavy dose of the running game. Zamir White, Alexander Madison, all this is going to play a part, and that's part of the running game is part of the staying on schedule, because they're definitely going to want to put a lot of Zamir White into the mix, so they keep the pressure off of Gardner Minshew and what he's trying to do offensively. And then the third thing, the biggest key for the Raiders is on the other side of the ball. Defensively, they just got to stop the run. They've got to be able to stop the run. It's something they struggled with in the preseason, as I mentioned before. They've got to show that was just a vanilla defense and they weren't really working on it, and it's not scheme or personnel struggles, right? I mean, if they can't stop the run, not only are they going to struggle this week against the Chargers, but Jim Harbaugh's brother, John Harbaugh in Baltimore, is coming up week 2. They're going to want to run the rock as well. So, I mean, there's so many teams that if you see this team can't stop the run, you're going to do that. You're not going to put your quarterback in harm's way. So, 2 things offensively: stay ahead of the schedule, stay ahead of the sticks. Gardner Minshew has to be smart with the ball, and then the defense got to be able to stop the run. If they could do those 3 things consistently, feel good about it, get the defense off the field where they're not on the field all day long, they have a really good chance to win this game. And I feel like they have a chance to win a lot of games if they can stick to that recipe. It's what happens when adversity hits is going to be the biggest question. So when you look at the Raiders, that's really what I think are the biggest 3 keys for success coming up on Sunday. When you look at the Chargers, what are you looking at? What are some of the 3 keys that you're looking at for this game coming up?
Yeah, so the 3 keys I got for this game for the Chargers, they absolutely have to do if they want to win this football game is, first and foremost, do not let Max Crosby derail this offense, because he has the ability to do so. Obviously, Joe Alt is the 5th overall pick for the Chargers, and he is going to be out of the frying pan and into the fire going up against one of the best edge rushers in the NFL. So welcome to the NFL, kid. Go try and block Max Crosby, okay? But obviously, don't leave him on an island every single snap. You guys have the Chargers have one of the better blocking tight ends in the league with Will Dissly. I do expect he'll probably be on that side, providing some assistance to Joe Alt from time to time. The second thing is establish the running game. Got to run the rock. If Jim Harbaugh wants to bring that identity of physicality, then it has to be something they stick with and they are consistent. But that means that the run blockers, the offensive line, the tight ends, the wide receivers, everybody has got to be on schedule, doing their job, and being there with great timing. That's all going to be very, very important for the Chargers to establish that running game. And then the defense has to be connected, Q. Too much in the past where the Chargers defense so disjointed and allowed so many explosive plays on the ground and through the air. They can't have the broken coverages and the misassignments in the running game and the passing game. You can't give the easy completions to Gardner Minshew and the Raiders offense. Those are the 3 things to me that I feel like the Chargers have to do if they want to win this game on Sunday.
No, those are really good ones. I mean, really, because Max Crosby, he wrecked practice. Every practice in training camp. Like, there's times they just had to take him out because he was wrecking practice, right? He wasn't allowed to get any work in. So yeah, I mean, stopping him from wrecking the game is a big key. And if that does happen, if the Chargers are successful in doing that, obviously they'll have a big focus on that. That means someone else has got to step up. I mentioned Malcolm Kuntz, Christian Wilkins, whatever. Somebody else has to step up and say, hey, if they're going to focus on him, let me go ahead and eat. You mentioned the short passing game. It's a West Coast offense led by Luke Getsy. It's about, the good timing on the passes, getting the ball out of his hands, and boom, getting the easy completions, as you mentioned, to guys like Devontae, Jacoby Myers, and others. So that'll be a big key. If you could take those away and limit them, that'll be, a good day at the office for the Chargers defense. And, the run game, again, that's going to be one of the biggest keys, I think, for both teams. Right?
I agree.
Both teams really want to run the ball, have a heavy emphasis on it. It's funny. I've been talking about the Raiders need to find a way to score 24 points. I can see this game being where neither one of these teams score 24 points, that both of these teams score under 20, because it's going to be a lot of ball control, a lot of running the rock, a lot of physicality in the trenches. And I mean, that makes for, I feel like, a good Sunday afternoon football game.
I can't wait, man. I can't wait. It's been far too long since we've got to watch our teams out there in a meaningful football game. The 2024 season is finally upon us, and I can't wait. I am going to be there at SoFi Stadium.
Nice.
I am flying in from Texas. I will be there in person to watch the season opener. I can't wait. But to make sure that you don't miss out on the Locked On Raiders podcast, go find your boy Q and find his show wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. And of course, Charger fans, you already know where to find us on Locked On Chargers and wherever you get your podcasts from. But until you guys see us tomorrow to cover keys for success and predictions, then we will see you then. Take it easy and enjoy the game.
So there it is. There it was, the first crossover edition officially in the books. And Raider Nation, if you're out at the game at SoFi Stadium, David Droegemeir is going to be there. If you happen to run into him and see him, shout him out. Say what's up, right? Good dude. All right, he comes from Temple, Texas. It's funny, we actually did one of our very first crossover editions when I was in Central Texas. He drove to the radio station that I was at, and we actually did the show live in the studio together. And this is before we were on YouTube. So the Chargers show and the Raiders show, neither one of us were on YouTube. So we just did the crossover edition live in the studio together, and I thought that was pretty awesome. And it's really, to this day, the only time I've ever done the crossover edition live in studio with another host of the podcast. So shout out to David Droegemeir, really good dude. He'll be at the game at SoFi on Sunday. I will not, but it's okay. I know Raider Nation will be there representing in a major way, and so we definitely look forward to that. But coming up on the show tomorrow, we'll go over the injury report. Of course, the Raiders had one on Wednesday. We'll go over Thursday's injury report heading into Friday. We'll also talk about, keys to victory. We'll expand on the keys to victory as far as I'm concerned for the Raiders over the Chargers. We'll get back to your calls and texts. We got a lot coming up on tomorrow's show as we close out the week really, really strong. And get ready for some football action Sunday, SoFi Stadium, 1 p.m. Pacific time. So we still got Friday, and then we'll be off to the weekend, Raider Nation. So excited about that. So till tomorrow, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.